Gosh, what a welcome. Thank you all so much for coming to hear this conversation with a truly remarkable woman. It is my absolute joy and honor to have Rose join me for my first event as a guest selector. And as Nick said, I asked in an optimistic bid for Rose to join us here because the topics of identity and of having a voice and challenging the existing order is one that I find so crucial, and I can't think of a better person to start this conversation than Rose. She needs no introduction, certainly to practically everyone in the room, I would imagine, but she is a thought leader and an agent of change. She's a writer, an author, a director, an artist, and a feminist whistleblower. She focused a spotlight on injustice and inequality in the entertainment industry with far-reaching consequences for societies all around the world. As an activist, she led a movement to break the silence and become a leading voice to disrupt the status quo. By creating the social justice platform Rose Army, she's signaled to the world that it is time to think differently. She's gained recognition as an actress who led roles in films such as The Doom Generation, Scream, Jawbreaker, and Planet Terror. She starred on the hit series Charmed, one of the longest-running female-led shows in TV history. And her directorial debut, Dawn, was nominated for the Grand Jury Prize at the Sundance Film Festival. The hugely talented Rose McGowan.
Thank you, Afua, and the hugely talented Afua Hirsch. I'm honored to be here with all of you, and especially to share thoughts on change and thoughts on bravery.
So this is the richest book. It contains so many details of your life, of your career, of your thoughts, of your agency. And I think the best way to kickstart the conversation is to hear you read from, I think you're going to read from the beginning of the book. So we're going to have a reading from Rose. We're going to then be in conversation for about 25 minutes. And we will then open up the floor to questions. This is also your opportunity to have a conversation with Rose. And I will do my best to make sure as many of you as possible can come in. So do be thinking about what you would most like to ask. As we are talking on stage, I will include you all. But first, to begin with, Rose, take it away.
Brave. This is dedicated to all of us survivors. Author's note. My life has always been one of extremes. Brave, the book, has proven to be no different. While writing this book, I endured being hacked, stalked, spied on, and had parts of this manuscript stolen. My life was infiltrated by Israeli spies and harassing lawyers, some of the most formidable on earth. These evil people hounded me at every turn while I went about resurrecting the ghosts that have made up my time on earth. I can only say it was extraordinarily stressful, an incredible high-wire act that required great strategy. There was never any other choice. Justice would be served. And it was. I am immeasurably proud of having a hand in this cataclysmic global reckoning and the felling of monsters. I truly believe that a win for one of us is a win for all of us. A few years ago, I realized society needed to be primed to hear the story. So I set about taking my voice of dissent public. I decided to openly fight the machine, the manufacturers of myth, the gaslighters themselves, the sacred men of Hollywood. For far too long, they'd been on top and able to get away with criminal behavior. I wanted to make it impossible to look away. And then the US election happened, making sexism far harder to deny. It paved the way for obvious truth to be revealed to those who'd for so long turned a blind eye. In early 2017, I'd been working on Brave for a few years when I made contact with two investigative reporters. It was time. The story took many twists and turns as it all unfolded, and I'm proud to have had a hand in starting the worldwide conversation. Since I and so many brave survivors have come forward, titans of every industry have toppled. We survivors have gained our power. We survivors are using our voices in record numbers. We cannot let up. And as hard as it is, we must continue to get even louder, to push even harder. We all count. We all matter. Here's to freedom, yours and mine. Now go breathe fire. Introduction. There once was a famous actress named Frances Farmer. She hated everything about her artificial life. She wanted to be free. Frances tried to escape fame and the toxicity of Hollywood's male-dominated world, but the studio had her captured. They took Frances to a mental institution. They locked her up. There was nothing wrong with her mind, she just didn't want to be famous. She screamed, begging for her life. Instead, they took it. They laid her down, restrained her, and shocked her mind with electricity. Shock, 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 over and over. The male powers that be in Hollywood wanted Frances to be a submissive, good little girl and remain so. What they left of her was an empty shell, a husk of a woman. Frances was never Frances again, and all because she didn't want to be sold as entertainment. Very few sex symbols escape Hollywood with their minds intact if they manage to stay alive at all. The streets of Hollywood are paved over the bodies of the vulnerable, the fucked with, the lied to, and the hurt. I know, I was almost one of them. You may think what happens in Hollywood doesn't affect you. You're wrong. Who do you think is curating your reality? Who is showing you who and what you want to be? I want to have a frank conversation about an inner sickness that I see few, if any, addressing. How and why Hollywood creates a fucked up mirror for you to look in. How you are seeing yourself through your own eyes, but perhaps not your own mind. Hollywood affects your life in ways you may not even be aware of. In my past of being sold as a product, I have been part of massaging your brain. I wiggled into your mind professionally. I was the cigarette advertisers told you you needed. I've also been on the other side of the looking glass, watching you, studying you, impersonating you. All of us in Hollywood, media, and advertising do. And you know what? We are really good at it. We've had it drilled into us how best to be marketed to you, how best to be sold to you, how to implant what we want into your brain, into your thoughts, into your wallet. And it works. You're sold a fake reality, all for the rock-bottom price of $14. The men who thought they own me think that they own you. They are the latest in a long line of myth peddlers, from the men behind the Bible to these modern-day content creators. They're mostly self-aggrandizing, egomaniacal abusers of power, and they've never been more dangerous. Few in Hollywood, and no actress that I can recall, has gone rogue. Hollywood operates like the mafia when it comes to protecting its own, especially if your own is a rich white male. Yes, I said it, but here's the thing. I didn't make it so, it just is. In other news, the sky is blue, or gray. By telling some of my story, I aim to shine a light. For those who think Hollywood is a silly joke, it's not. It's a deadly serious business, and one that keeps its winnings. You may think it's as simple as forking over hard-earned cash for a night out at the movies or paying a cable bill to be entertained. I'm here to tell you the price you're paying is much higher than you know. Things that should have, you are paying with your mind, your behavior, and your patterns. Things that should have no price tag. In our as-seen-on-TV society, the simple fact is that what you have watched and consumed from birth has formed you and continues to form you. Even those who've opted out of its false reality have to stay vigilant to remain free from the lies and from the messages that do far more harm than they should, because they are insidious and they are everywhere. My life, as you will read, has taken me from one dangerous cult to another, one of the biggest cults of all, Hollywood. I say biggest because short of a nuclear bomb, Hollywood has the farthest reach. Brave is the story of how I fought my way out of these cults and reclaimed my life. I want to help you do the same. You can say no more. You can say yes to a freer you. You can be free of the trap that's been set for you, and believe me, it has been set. I am writing this book because I want to have a real conversation with the public, and most especially you. I am honored that my words will enter your consciousness and your conscience, that my thoughts will rest in your mind. I take that responsibility seriously. Call what I'm doing a public service, and you'd be correct, it is. Hollywood is a dirty town up to some dirty tricks. This is not a tell-all. This is a tell it how it is.
Thank you, Rose. And I'm so glad you chose that part of the book to read, because you're speaking to all of us. And I think when people see the title of this book, Brave, they may think that you are referring to your experiences deciding to be a whistleblower. But it's far deeper than that. You are talking about releasing yourself from patterns of abuse that you say we all suffer from just by consuming the kind of material we do through Hollywood movies. Can you start by telling us how you know about how cults work? Because you have a really complex background.
Well, I have firsthand knowledge of how cults work because I grew up in one of the big baddies. It was called Children of God. And my father was the leader of the Italian chapter. And you are right about the title. It is not about me, even though my father's nickname for me was the Brave One. It's about all of us. The very last lines in the book. Because I wrote this for us to all get brave and for us to unwire what we've been wired to think. I know you can change the world starting with yours just by being brave. And I did write it to show people that they might, in fact, be in a certain kind of a cult light, if you will. Because a lot of people say it's so strange how I grew up. But how I grew up really informed me to seeing the trigger words that are used in society against all of us constantly. They're not that different from how I grew up. I just grew up in a very hardcore, specific version of it where it was so obvious. And I think to a lot of us who think in a lot of ways that we're free, we don't realize how we formed our thoughts about ourselves as women, as men, as anything, come from what we've consumed. And the paradigm that was set forth before we were even born. And we can be trapped in a structure without realizing it. And because it's diluted to culture, they might not realize, in fact, that they're being triggered and being used as pawns in a lot of ways. And the way, in my book, I use a lot of, let me put it this way, I watched my father wire a lot of thought into people's minds. And in my book, I very specifically do the best I can to unwire a lot of those thoughts and to help get us to be more free and to get more brave. And to be brave is facing adversity, which we've all faced. I compare the cults I grew up in to the cult of Hollywood because I realized one day that it was the same, that it was this hardcore, triggering version of what we get, like how the message that you get that you should have long hair, which is fine if you want it, but just check your motives. Is it you that wants it, or is it society that's telling you this is what you need to have as a woman? And since I was told directly that I needed to have long hair, otherwise the men in Hollywood wouldn't want to F me, and if they didn't want to F me, then they wouldn't hire me. I feel like, so I get a direct version of what's watered down to other people, and that's how I can ring the alarm bell.
And you are incredibly generous in the book. You really share some of the really difficult experiences in your childhood, and it's a conflicting experience for the reader because some of it is really horrific, but at the same time you come across, you describe yourself as a born dissenter. And when you read the book, as I'm sure you all will, you get a sense of this person who was born with a fierce resistance. Even in a cult which exists to program people, you just couldn't buy into it at a young age. What is that about you, Rose?
My sister was asked recently where I got it from, and she said, I have no idea. And I don't know. I think it's just a logic-based thing. I saw what people were doing, and it wasn't squaring with what they were saying, kind of like, say, a lot of politicians or a lot of people that are thought leaders or people that we're supposed to hold up on a pedestal. And I just thought, why? It's not pure. And when they came to my bed every night, or my mat on the floor, saying, have you let God into your heart? I would say, no, not today, try tomorrow. And as I reasoned, it wasn't that I didn't believe in God, I just didn't believe in theirs. And I had just yet to find somebody that I could whole stock believe in to sign my life and my will away for. And I just thought, why is everyone telling me the sky is purple? It's not. Just stop. And I saw that at such a young age. Another sister of mine said, Rose, why don't you just go along with it? It'll be easier for you. But I knew I'd be selling a bit of myself for that.
Because there was physical punishment involved in refusing to go along with it. So you were really paying a price for your dissent.
Yes, I paid a price, but I think the price, had I gone along with it, would have been a lot higher.
One of the things that really stood out for me in the book is that you developed an incredible instinct to suss out danger. You were very, very in tune with threat because of this environment that presented so many threats to you. You were incredibly good at detecting bullshit. But when it came to leaving the cult and entering Hollywood, and you put this across so powerfully, you went from a place that I think we would all recognize you need to be on high alert to Hollywood, where I think people aspire to be, and you didn't apply the same suspicion and skepticism that had saved you in childhood. Why didn't you use all of that street smartness and savvy when you got into Hollywood?
Well, I'd never met such fancy people before, you see. And I don't know. It's a question I ask myself, with some self-recrimination. And I was a homeless runaway at 13, and I did have to have street smarts and all of these things, but I think because also the people I was meeting were my employers, I believed them, and that was naive, and I was used to being with kind of intellectual weirdos, not just the people that smile at you and are so friendly to your face and stab you in the back later. I didn't think that I would be set up. I didn't really think it through too much. I was discovered, so it wasn't like most people start very young. Like Scarlett Johansson, I think, started at 6 months old, wow. Right? They start very young, and so you learn the ropes, you learn who the bad ones are, you learn who to stay away from. I never learned any of that, and I went into it backwards. My first job was a starring role in a movie,
And you were alone. You'd been encouraged to divorce your parents, so you were
Yes.
literally alone.
I was alone, and looking back, I could have been a lot smarter about it, but at the same time, Hollywood is such a strange place with such strange rules, and they immediately tell you what the rules are. Of course, they're unwritten. They're just rules that have been handed down generationally and that they adhere to.
And is there a metaphor in this for all of us? It's almost as if we've all let our guard down with Hollywood. We all buy into the beautiful women and the powerful men and the fantasy life and the perfect body. Is that part of why we've allowed ourselves to get to this point where in 2018 we are only now confronting the decades of abuse that have been going on behind the scenes? And not even that behind the scenes sometimes.
No, it's pretty upfront. It's pretty upfront. They're not shy about it. They don't have... So, like, I sold a script to this company, and the company told me, set in 1971, the screenplay, and they told me that a certain character couldn't be black because it wasn't period correct. Wow. To which I responded, we were black before we were white, so I'm going to say that, in fact, it is period correct. Just thinking.
Good comeback.
I took the script back from them. They're not producing it. But they tell you up front, they tell you what they are, and I think there is a lesson for all of us. If you start looking at movies critically, start looking at why is the woman always carrying the laundry basket for no apparent reason? Is that all she does? Why? And what you guys don't get to see are the character descriptions in the screenplays. They would make your eyes pop open. That's where they can really shine. Like just little things, like they'll put Oliver, 17, Trey, African American, 18. That's just business as usual. They really are very narrow about it, and they really do study how best to sell it to you, and you really have to look at like what information you're getting, what are they telling you. It's not just casual entertainment. I wish it were. I think now we can look at a lot of films with different lenses. I'm I know of a film that was just shot and they cut the sex scene because they realized, oh, that's what gratuitous means. It's taken them quite this long. You're like, oh.
I grew up with Scream being a seminal movie in my teenage years, and I'm sure many of you know Rose from Scream, and I was fascinated by the story that once you realized that there was already a brunette female lead, you were not going to get the part unless you took action. And what did you do?
I dyed my hair blonde. Because, in movies, you're not allowed to have two dark-haired girls because the audience might not be able to tell the difference between you. That's literally it. That's it. And it was just strategic, and it was just part of survival skills, really.
And it really reminded me of stories about race as well, with black actors being told, we already have a black character in this movie, so...
Well, they do that with women directors. We've already tried one. And you're like, try again. Keep trying, because there's been a lot of trying on the other half.
So there are the structural issues with these attitudes, but then there is the behavior of individual men in Hollywood. And you do not flinch in the book from describing some of the traumatic things, right from your very first role as an extra. And, that really shocked me, because here you are, were you 15 at the time?
14.
14, as an extra. And it just seemed, for you to have been molested as you were, that this must be something that was just happening in a casual way.
It did just happen in a casual way. I also, the Me Too reckoning caused me to look back, and during the writing of this book over the last 3 years, it caused me to look at a lot of the things that happened to me and realize, oh, that was not a sexual experience, that was molestation. And it's scary to go back and recatalog and kind of realize what had been done to you, and done so casually, as you say. Done so casually. Just the cinematographer, who was then hired on Scream, and he said, I recognize you from somewhere. Luckily, he got fired a week in, and because of the blonde hair, he didn't recognize me. But it was, it's done as part and parcel. You are owed them. It's kind of like a reverse groupie thing. Like you're not, and they always portray it as if you're trying to get the part, but what if you already have the part? What's their excuse then?
You've been so courageous in speaking about your experiences with, I know you don't like to name him, Harvey Weinstein, who in the book is known as the monster. And if you read the book, it becomes abundantly clear why you give him that name. How much of a role have you played in exposing what he, and this isn't to detract from the scale of the problem and the number of people who are involved in it, but he does stand out just because of the sheer power he had in the industry and the scale of the abuse?
Well, I had about a year left of writing the book when I contacted and was put in contact with a New York Times reporter. And I said, it's really big, and you're going to have to be really brave. And I know numerous journalists had fallen for years and failed to report the story. And so what I did was get NBC. Ronan Farrow at the time was working for NBC. And so I got NBC kind of in a war with the New York Times for the story, because what I understand are egos, men's egos at the top of the pyramid. So I set them in a war with each other. And I knew I never wanted it to be NBC, which is a big station in America, a big network, because I'd heard about the stuff going on in their work environment. But I needed to get them at least halfway. I needed the New York Times to get halfway so they wouldn't falter, because they were having everything being thrown at them too. And I will say, Harvey Weinstein, his protection came from the Democratic Party, far more so than Hollywood. He was their de facto cult leader and their star, and thanked as many times as God at the Oscars. A dead heat. But it was the Democratic Party and the operatives there. And he set up his whole operation to do this, and he tended to go for anybody. I mean, the scale, the sheer magnitude of it, it's probably in the thousands. He just fucked with the wrong person.
And we're all benefiting from your courage in speaking out. And I urge you to read this. It's difficult to read, but it's important. And it's not just him. What really struck me, and you deal with it so powerfully, was the men around him.
And women.
And women. And you write about going into this hotel for this fateful day. You say the day that evil hijacked your life when you had this meeting with him. And people looking at you in hindsight knowingly that they knew that when they saw this young actor going up to his hotel room, they knew what was going to happen. And they looked down, but they didn't do anything. They didn't try to help you.
No, and in fact, people have this idea of a hotel room that you're opening a door and there's the bed, right? That's how our hotel rooms usually look. But this is a presidential suite, so it's the entire top floor of a massive hotel with offices inside and like 2 living rooms. It's not how we necessarily perceive hotel rooms to be. And my meeting was, in fact, in the dining room of the restaurant at the hotel. And from the maitre d' who funneled me upstairs, everybody, it was like a chain of command passing you off. And they all knew, including my then female manager who set me up.
And then later tried to tell you that it was good for your career.
Right. And I was already in the middle of my second film. I was in the middle of my second film for him and his company when this happened to me. I was not trying to get any job. I already had the jobs. And believe me, I was so mad at myself because I'd survived so much already with what you said, street smarts. I was furious at myself, which I know a lot of us who get assaulted are, that I'd let down my guard, that I thought that this person, this bigwig, would be safe. And it was, in fact, the complete opposite.
How do you feel about the events that have unfolded since you speaking out about Harvey Weinstein?
Well, I think it's pretty great that we've shown that we can cut off the head of power. I think it's pretty fantastic that I get a tweet from a girl that works at McDonald's and says, because of you, I went and I talked about my manager. It's been a hard last 10 months. I'm only coming out of it calmly now, but it was a real nail biter.
Did you sense how big this would get and how far it would go?
I think part of bravery is not really thinking too far ahead. I just wanted him to stop. I just wanted it to stop. And I wanted the lying to stop, and I wanted the protection to stop, and I wanted to stop being looked down on. And so many other of us, because the whole casting couch idea, that's such a myth. It's more like the rape couch. And Hollywood's notorious for it. There's the first case in the 1920s that was of rape that was brought against one of the heads of a studio who farmed over 100 young girls out to all young actresses, saying this was their big break, and instead it was a mass rape with box office exhibitors, the people that own theaters, coming from all over the country to have a party. It goes on and on and on, and I wish I had better things to report. I wish people were better, and I hope they get better. But don't you want to know who's in your minds? Because I can guarantee you've seen a lot of Harvey Weinstein movies.
It's pretty hard to not have seen a Harvey Weinstein movie.
Yes, he was constant. He was omnipresent. He was everywhere. I had to endure seeing him and so many of his victims for years, and on nights, where you'd see him getting yet another Oscar, or someone that was starring in one of his films get an Oscar. I did have moments of I should have shut up, because I told people right away.
Do you think it's not a coincidence that it's you that has triggered this? You were always an outsider in Hollywood. You came from a background unlike almost anyone else. You didn't aspire to the same things. Is that experience of growing up in a cult, of running away, has that helped you by making you resistant, if you like, to the kind of the norms that seduce other people to go along with this system?
Completely. I was so used to butting up against a system, even though I had to bide my time. in Hollywood, I have a thick white line on the inside of my mouth where I would pull my hair down and just chew and just get through it, don't do anything. And don't say anything, don't step out of line, but at the same time, privately, really, I just showed up and I did my work. Hollywood for me was like a bunch of people in a cafeteria that would look at me and say, we don't want you to sit at our table. And I would just think, your table doesn't exist in my reality. No problem. It was never a place of acceptance, and it was very much an open secret. So they would look at me kind of like, oh, she has something we don't want to catch. And it made it a very lonely road. But at the same time, at the end of the day, if all you have is yourself, then that's what you fight to keep.
You talk about your long hair, and hair seems really symbolic for you. You write in the book about times when you had long hair being your unhappiest times because you were doing it to conform to something that wasn't who you were. You were hiding your real self while kind of playing the role of somebody playing a role.
Right.
How much is this book a critique of these wider norms about female beauty and femininity and what it means to be a woman and what we should all aspire to?
It's definitely a wider critique of that, and it's saying like who gave you that information? And again, it's just check yourself. Do you have a fake tan, fake nails, fake hair because you want to? If so, go you. But if it's based on this training that you've gotten, that this is what it means to be a woman, then maybe check your motives and see what you are. But at the same time, I also talk about men in here, and I also talk about, how my heart breaks for the trap that's set for them, that what they're stuck in, that they get robbed so early of experience and emotion and the ability to relate to each other as humans by keeping all of this segregated, by keeping the looks segregated, by keeping it what men want. I mean, how many times have we seen magazines, like 20 things that men want? I don't know. What do you want, sir? Like, how would they know? You know what I mean? But they're speaking on your behalf. And it gets drilled into us from such an early age, and it gets drilled into men. I look at people. There's a study they did of 5-year-old boys, and they said, how do girls run? And they're like, and they just ran. They asked 11-year-old boys, how do girls run? And they're like, oh, going like this. So what's happening to them in that age group? At that point, they've been stolen and hijacked. At that point, they've become other. My thing is actually, hopefully, getting us all to see that we're human before anything else, because I think that's the only way to solve this mess.
And while we can all see that things are beginning to change, even if only the debate around Hollywood and men in powerful positions who abuse it, these deeper questions about our cultural norms on gender, do you feel that we are making progress?
I think in some ways we're making a lot of progress, in other ways going into the binary and the narrowness of it, kind of, it might be easy for me to say that. I don't know. I think we needed to have a collective conversation. And that's all I wanted, and I said that in the book. I just wanted us to have a conversation. Let's be adult about this. Let's grow up. Because when you're little, your legs hurt, but you got taller. Go you. That's what being brave is about. That's what pushing through your fear is about. That is what questioning things is about. That is what pushing back. And being the one that raises their hand and says, you know what, no, this is not okay. But I do think that if we can get to those kids early enough, and again, I'm not one of those people who's like, oh, for the children. I'm like, no, I want that 85-year-old. I want them to know that it's never too late to be free and to be fully themselves.
This might sound like a strange thing to say, but I sometimes like to be optimistic about Trump and see him as a kind of
I do too.
Creating an enabling environment for radicalism. People who thought that feminism no longer needed to exist because we live in a post-inequality society are probably not saying that anymore.
Well, I mean, I started writing the book. I started getting really mad about 3 years ago when Obama was president and the equal pay for women was voted down on the Senate floor, and he didn't say anything. I do think Trump has done us a favor if we can survive him.
Which is an if.
It's an if. But I think showing us so clearly what racism is, showing us so clearly what sexism is, and the thing is, he's doing what they all did before, he just says it. Like, not like, I'm not coming at it from the perspective of like, he just says what we want to hear. I don't want to hear that. But it is, in fact, the subterfuge that so many of the people that his predecessors, they worked under those same auspices. He just is so dumb he actually says it. He just lets us all in on the secret. You know what I mean? And I must admit, I do like watching him on mute playing like the Carmina Burana or something, and I watch his little hands flail around. But I think he has done us a favor.
You say, when you're talking about cults, in order to escape from a cult, you have to actually know that you're in one.
Correct.
So is he part of helping us to diagnose that we have been living in a world that perpetuates some very dangerous ideas about gender roles?
Completely.
Beauty?
Completely. It's very interesting to me that a lot of his supporters, they're right on target about Hollywood. They're right on target. They're like, it's fake, it's faux liberals, who are like masquerading as these PC people and doing crap things in the background, and they're completely correct. Somehow they can't see the giant elephant in the room, what's in their own backyard, but that's a cult. That's a cult. I would say Trump supporters, that's largely a cult. He's their leader. He uses trigger words. He says the same things over and over. But that is not unlike what we get as society, just in a more watered-down version.
I'm curious, now that you're a director yourself, and an award-nominated one at that,
Thank you.
how you are going to navigate this, because now you're producing content, and the more successful your films become, which I have no doubt they will, do you worry about how you are going to steer clear of becoming part of the Hollywood machine yourself as a director?
No. I don't worry about that, because I've never spoken that same language. I don't know how. It's not in my lexicon. Abuse is not in my lexicon. I don't know, short of funding it myself, if I'll be able to direct another movie, because Hollywood, someone said the other day, are you persona non grata with Hollywood or in Hollywood? And I was like, no, they're persona non grata with me. I get a say too. So I hope I direct more. It is something, but at the same time, I feel like it's not time for metaphors right now. It's time for like some bald truth. So I have no fear of becoming like those before me, no. It's categorically impossible.
And can you give us any optimism that somebody can do it their own way, that someone can bypass this machine that has become so toxic?
They're going to have to be really strong. I don't know. I think optimistically there are good people there, just like anywhere. But a lot of them get very corrupted by the machine as it goes on, and so much of it is because it is a cult. And so much of it is because they start believing these invisible rules that don't actually exist, that weren't set forth to benefit them. Just like anything, if you're in the cult of woman or the cult of man, and if you're supporting a power structure that doesn't support you, guess what you're in? You're in a cult. I hope so. I hope it gets better. I hope it gets brave. I know there's still a lot of predators there that I know if people collectively came out against, they would just clean house. And I think we all know, like, the rot starts at the top. I think, personally, I don't engage with a lot of Hollywood product because I don't want their thought in my mind. But at the same time, I love classic film. But I guess if you're going to have rotten thought, go to the masters. I don't know. Optimistically, I think it's just about dissecting what you want for yourself and what you want to digest.
And having gone through the thought process instead of unthinkingly
Exactly.
digesting all this content that you don't know how it's affecting you.
Exactly.
we're almost time to bring in the audience, but I just want to ask you how you are, Rose, because you're very honest in the book about some of your really personal struggles. You suffered from anorexia, you have had health problems, you have been through an incredible amount. You emerge as this remarkably resilient, strong person. But how are you now in the context of your life, and what is your life like?
My life is a little strange. I sold my house in Hollywood. I live nowhere.
You literally, do you move around? Is that by choice?
Kind of. I feel like it's best to be on the move right now. I had a lot of scary people tailing me, private investigators, spies. This has all been documented, by the way, in the New Yorker and the New York Times, so it's not...
Because it does sound out there, but that you couldn't make any of this up. It's stranger than fiction.
Trust me, I am aware of that. I am very aware of that. It's not optimal right now. I don't know. I mean, I metaphorically burnt it down, so there's not really a place for me. So I'm trying to find my way in the world right now. I'm gearing up to write my second book, Trust, which will be more about the behind the scenes of this whole last year. And this last year the stress of it almost snapped me. And I'm strong, but it was really hard, you guys. It was like it felt like I was manning the Titanic and just refusing to let it sink this time. And every day, being triggered by his face in the news stories and people coming at me and slandering others that are brave enough to speak. I just couldn't sit idly by. My life now, I'm in the hallway, you know, when you're there in your life and you're like, you don't know which door is going to open yet. But I have an album I've been working on for the past 3 years in addition to the book. That's with like a Daft Punk producer, a Massive Attack producer, and that, for me, my art and the visual art that I do is my way of staying sane. And I hope the next time we meet, I have somewhere to live. Right now, I've got 2 suitcases. It's been about 5 months of that. It's odd, but I'm used to being somewhat itinerant.
Do you feel protected by your public presence? And because you write about discovering Twitter, and I loved, because I follow Rose on Twitter. If you don't, I urge you to. She's brilliant. And you write about kind of discovering that this was a platform where you could have a voice, you could say stuff, and your first post, you were casually posting the kind of misogynist madness you get in scripts. Every day, you didn't think it was a big deal. It said women have to have a lot of cleavage and wear a push-up bra. And you just posted it and went about your business, having no idea how ordinary people would react.
I thought, oh, this is Tuesday. This is not a big deal. But then I thought, oh, if you think this is a big deal, wait for it. Wait for it. Twitter has been really instrumental. You know, Twitter is where I kind of go hard. Instagram is the softer side of Sears. It's hard. I go on Twitter and I'm like, do not get mad today. Do not get mad today. I'm like, oh, oh. It kind of goes like shooting fireballs, you know. It was a way for me to have a voice, because previous to that, it was just only if someone did an interview with me, and they usually come with their own kind of agenda, and then there's a publicist involved, and it was all bullshit, let's be real. It was all just like fake. And I thought, oh my God, it was honestly Ashton Kutcher. I was reading, I've never met him.
Who'd have thought?
But he
was behind a feminist revolution.
Weirdly enough, yes. I was sitting on a plane reading some Airplane magazine, and there was an article with him, and he said, Twitter's the only voice a public person can have as their own. And it kind of like thunderstruck. And so I started from there, and I started really about 3.5 years ago, pushing at the Hollywood machine, just like, I'm coming, and destabilizing them, because nobody had gone up against Variety, which is like one of the big trade magazines, or Hollywood Reporter. They literally didn't know what was happening. And it was just, but it was so filled with things like Harrison Ford, his ex-wife, dying. She wrote E.T. and a number of other amazing movies. And the cover of Variety when she died was a picture of Harrison Ford pulling her with her head turned like this, saying Harrison Ford's ex-wife dies. Or with the New York Times when I went up against them, and not long ago, their headline was, "It's the 20th anniversary of the Monica Lewinsky scandal." So I tweeted at the New York Times, which nobody does because they want them to give them good book reviews. And so I tweeted at them and I said, "Fix your headline. It's the 20th anniversary of the Bill Clinton scandal."
Thank you.
It's just a reframing.
I can sense that people are so keen to come in. I could talk to Rose all day, so I'm going to let you have your turn. I would like you to keep your questions really brief, please, because I know that we are going to have a few to get through. And we have roving mics, so I will direct them to come to you. And if you go on too long, I will cut you off. I'm going to say that now so you don't get offended. It is not personal, right? The lady in the front was the first hand that I saw, and then the lady in the white T-shirt in the middle there, second. Thank you.
Hi, Rose.
Hi.
My name's Rachel.
Hi, Rachel.
Your book was incredible. It's a bit like being run over by a train for anyone who's not yet read it. I read it in one go. I didn't speak to anyone for a good couple of hours afterwards. It was just so full on. I think, as you said, it's definitely stranger than fiction. How do you deal with, I mean, just reading it, it's insane and it's overwhelming. To then talk to other people about it, it must be so raw, and having that constantly being pulled out of you, how do you find lightness and freedom from all of the dark, twisty stuff that you've been so brave to share with so many?
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Writing this book was incredibly hard. It was like calling up some evil ghosts, and they were all around, you know. Something about the book being published, once it was published, I was able to let go of a lot of the stuff. During the 3 years it took me to write it, I didn't visit my father's grave. I couldn't. I was too mad at him. But I've since gone and made peace with him. And I think at heart of it, I'm a pretty jolly, optimistic, hopeful person. And somehow, in the face of all the weirdness, have managed to hold on to that because I didn't want them to steal that, too. You know, I fought for that. And I think that's something that we have to fight for ourselves. And thank you for reading it. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank
you.
Yes.
Rose, I'm Jane. Nice to
Hi,
meet
Jane.
you. Thank you for giving me the courage to share my Me Too story. I wanted to ask, my son and I have been studying Antigone, and to be able to show him a real, this is Antigone. I wanted to ask you about how you feel about people who believe that women should behave a certain way when they speak out, that you can go too far for people to fully get behind it. They can agree with what you have to say, but you know that maybe we're not well behaved enough. And I would like to see what you would say to that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jean. I think, and hello to your son, I think there is no right way to do this. And the thing is, I talk in my book, I know I make people uncomfortable. And you have to know that when you speak out and when you go hard, it is going to make people uncomfortable. But if you realize that their discomfort isn't your issue, it's not your problem, it is your truth. And I think previous to this last year, I would say women overall, and I'm generalizing, it wasn't going so well. And for a lot of victims and survivors, it wasn't going so well. Being well behaved wasn't really working out in our favor. So I think, for me, I realized that a lot of people didn't like me just because I existed as a celebrity. So I finally realized, I was like, well, I'll just give them a reason not to like me. And then maybe some others will like me too. I never thought about that. I think that's the part of bravery, is that it is scary. You just do it anyway. And it does sometimes feel like your skin's being pulled off with needles. And it is really scary. And I applaud you.
Thank you. Let's have some more questions. Lady up there, gentleman right in the back up there. And I'll choose one more now. Yeah. Lady over there.
Hi.
Hi.
I was wondering for what kind of advice you might give to people that are wanting to rewire with you and follow this movement and still interact in this culture that we are building for ourselves, and what kind of content can we consume responsibly?
Thank you.
I think it's such a personal journey, starting to realize what hits you wrong when you kind of feel that feeling inside that something's not quite right? And start really looking and dissecting, almost as if you were in a laboratory looking at something under a microscope, and start looking at what they're telling you, why they're telling it to you, what it's doing to you, and how it's affecting you, and then make a choice from there. There's a girl I know who she gets harassed a lot walking down the street, many of us, and instead of saying F off, I said, just stop. Just stop. And that hand out, and it seems to glitch the thing. And it's almost like that stop with what they're telling you to believe. It's almost like putting that hand out definitively of no, you can't pollute and corrupt my mind. But it's also important to see what they're doing so you can see what they've done to you before and how you can unwire that. And really just look at what are your belief systems and what are theirs. And try to unwire those two things because they're really terribly wrapped up, usually.
Thank you. Yes.
Aye, well, on the one hand, it sounds pretty grim, US politics. You've got Trump over here, and then you've got the Weinstein-Clinton party as the main opposition. I'm just wondering if you see any hope in the mass movements that built up around Bernie Sanders, and then even more so in the resistance to Trump since he's come in, and how you think they can get Trump out, but without being sucked back into the mainstream cult.
Thank you.
That is a very good question, sir.
That's a big one.
That's a real big one. Thanks for the easy question. I think we're all going to have to do some hard work and some soul searching and be brave and really push back at, there's something that, I can't remember if it's Canada or Australia, but there's something they do there. They call it the moral minority. And in America, they call it the moral majority, and that's usually the people that are, So all these politicians imagine that there's this giant legion of people that hate everybody and only want a radicalized version of the Bible to be believed. And I think just by changing words, if we just say moral minority, if we realize that we are in fact the majority, the sane ones, that we are in fact the majority, and we have to do our part locally, civically. Is that a word?
It is now.
Okay. I don't know. America, man, I'm trying to move to the UK. I don't know.
Well, we have some issues, but that is for another. We have some issues too. Okay, yes, please.
Hi, Rose. I'm
Hi.
Christopher. It's nice to meet you.
Hi.
What advice can you give to someone who is trying to encourage someone who's afraid to be brave?
Someone to what?
Someone who's afraid to be brave. What advice can you give to someone who's trying to encourage
Right.
a survivor to be brave?
I would say contrary action, meaning if your brain tells you to do one thing, which is to stay small and to stay scared, you have to do the opposite of what it... I kind of raised myself, and I didn't know what to do. I only knew I could do the opposite of what I'd been told. And so if my brain tells me to do one thing, and I can feel that it's to stay small, I generally will train myself to do the exact opposite, even though it's scary. And we have to look into fear and look at what's the worst case scenario and can you survive it? You've already survived so much. I think you can survive more. And it's not fair. It's not fair that you have to, but I know you can.
Thank you. Thank you, Rose. I'm going to try and just squeeze in 2 more questions quickly. Yes, gosh, that was such a fast hand. I can't ignore it there. Lady in blue. And then there was another one at the back. I haven't really had any from the back of this bit yet. And then the lady in pink. Thank you. Make them good ones, because they're our last 2. No pressure.
Rose, welcome. I'm Jan.
Hi.
Were you surprised at the reaction to your revelations and also the #MeToo campaign by certain well-known French actresses, Catherine Deneuve, who reportedly said, but what is all this fuss about? It's just male-female interaction.
Well, I don't know if rape is a male-female interaction. You know, I don't think it has to be. I think a lot of these women would have to look at a lot of the things that happen to them in their own life and career. And I think it might sometimes just be too much for them. That's my feeling on that.
Do you feel anger towards them, or do you feel compassion, or both?
I feel both, because I think it's disgusting to come at rape survivors and to come at something that is just overall trying to do better for mankind and womankind. But I do feel compassion because I know what it's like to not want to review your own life, because it might just be too much and make your head explode. I have to think it comes from that, otherwise I have to think these people are just terrible humans.
I can see why you choose the former. Yes, last question.
Hi Rose, thank you for the book and the talk. I was just wanting to ask, what part of your journey would you say has been more liberating, going back to your look, outing Weinstein and the other Hollywood pigs, writing the book, or just the twittering and...
Being here with you guys.
Thank you.
A happy ending.
A happy ending.
Thank you. It has been such a joy. Thank you for your brilliant questions. And a last round of applause, please, for the amazing Rose McGowan. Thank you.